Welcome, everyone. Very pleased to be able to bring you another webinar in our series. I believe we've done 4 similar events over the past year. Today's topic is a little bit different. Workcationing in Japan, how the land of more work and less play must learn to embrace the global trend. So this is, a new direction for us. We've done a lot of talks on border closings and immigration issues. So I'm quite excited to go in a different direction. I've been looking forward to this one a lot more than the usual sessions for 3 reasons. Firstly, as I said, all the other webinars have been kind of policy oriented and related to the pandemic. So it's nice to be able to present a more upbeat topic. Secondly, the subject is extremely relevant right now, as the workcation concept is something that so many companies are starting to explore, as are we as a company. And lastly, and most importantly, this time I'm fortunate enough to be joined by a longtime partner and friend, supporter of ReloJapan, Ruth Jarman. Hello, Ruth.
Hello, everyone.
So I think you probably know Ruth if you've been in Japan for any amount of time. You'd have to search pretty hard to find someone in the expat community here who isn't familiar with the work that she's done, supporting globalization and internationalization. And you'd have to search even harder to find anyone who's contributed more to her colleagues and her community, whether it be her work in the Japanese service department industry for so many years, where she interacted with thousands of foreign executives. How many was it? Was it 40,000? I think the number was.
Well, when I calculated over the 12 years, it was 40,000 directly, indirectly, trying to understand what people's needs are. So yeah, a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, decent.
I was busy.
Of course, your efforts to connect Japanese companies and communities with international residents and visitors through your Jarman International Network has also been extremely notable. Of course, not to mention the books and the TV appearances. So yeah, Ruth has been a very visible presence throughout her time in Japan, and a very energetic, to say the least, energetic advocate of all things, both international and, as we'll touch on later in the event, local and regional.
Right.
So before I hand things over to Ruth, who is a lot more familiar with the workcation concept than I am, I just want to mention here that while all of you will be on mute, the participants will be on mute during the session, you will be able to submit questions and comments through the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, which we will address in the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Of course, if you have a super urgent, super relevant question that comes up during the talk, we may be able to respond, but in principle, Q&A will be held until the end. I also want to thank my colleague Steve for running things behind the scenes, and of course for allowing us to use his Zoom account again. So without further ado, let's get the presentation started. I think we can start with the word workcation. It's kind of a hybrid word, right? A hybrid style of work. I don't think the concept is that well known here, right? Ruth, can you help define what workcation actually means? I think some people, they think it's a vacation and you're answering a few emails, which of course we all do anyway.
Right.
So, what's your take on workation?
I would describe a workcation. So we have to separate the concept of workcation from remote work. So it's 2 completely different things. So remote work is pretty much where you are responsible for your task in a timely manner, but you just happen to be working from a different location, right? Whereas a workcation is when you are actually on a vacation, but you're also doing work at the same time. So you're on a vacation, you're taking a break, but you're also responsible for certain tasks, and you're working, but on a vacation. That's how I understand it. Another one that I've heard used in my presentation in a minute is I think it's pleasure, like business and pleasure mixed. In Japanese, they say pleasure. So that's another one. It's mixing work and rest, whereas remote work is working from a different location. I think that's the way that I would define it. So
Got it.
shall
Very
I
clear.
go into my presentation? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I mean, first of all, it's such an honor to be working with William and Steve. We've worked together for a very long time. Steve Burson, who's behind the scenes organizing this, was actually the first person who really believed in my new company and supported my new company at the beginning. So I'm always in very deep debt to Steve. But Steve, you shouldn't take advantage of that, okay? Anyway, it's an honor to be working with everyone today, to see you all here. And this is a very interesting new concept. The style of work is changing. So I would like to think about that with everyone. And hopefully towards the end, we can have kind of a discussion. So William told me I can only talk for 30 minutes. I'm used to talking for 10 hours, just kidding. So I will be speaking for about 30 minutes. And there, you know, if you have a question or you need a clarification partway through, totally fine. But I would like to first just present the case. Can everyone see the presentation okay? William, can you see this?
Looks good.
Okay. So I can't see everyone else, but I hope that you're interested in this topic just like I am. I was speaking to William a little bit earlier that I think the concept of workation in Japan is very timely, actually sort of ahead of its time, because I feel like a lot of the companies, a lot of us, anybody who's employing anyone who's an employee of somewhere is more thinking about how to deal with remote work. How do we change the style of working to fit this new environment that we're in, right? And then the next conversation is going to be about workations, right? So how do we take vacations in this new environment? It feels like if you wanted to work 24/7, you could. So there's so much opportunity. And then there's also our health and our well-being and our mental state that we have to take care of. So we do have to take breaks. So to me, this workation concept is kind of like a hybrid idea of work and vacation. So here I'm saying that workations and how they change the way we work. So this is not just for employers, it's also for employees, it's for independent contractors, it's for anyone who's doing any kind of work at all. How do we insert the concept of rest into our 24/7 like work style? Where do we slow down? How do we do it? You know, what are the boundaries that we are going to set for how we want to work? And I think this is a topic that we're all going to have to think about, you know, for our kids, for the people that we work with, for our clients, for everybody. So I would first like to set the stage with this concept of, many of you have probably heard of it, the Great Resignation. I don't know, you might have heard of it. It was in the news quite a bit during COVID. Basically around the world, it wasn't seen as much in Japan, but around the world, especially in Europe, America, and I think also quite a bit in Australia as well, that people during the COVID times with all the lockdowns and stuff realized that remote work was a possibility and that they don't have to be in the office and they don't have to be assigned to one company. So especially in the United States, a lot of people, I'll show you the slide in the next slide, but a lot of people decided, okay, I don't want to stay with the same company. I want to be an independent contractor. I would like to start my own company and have clients. You know, if I'm living in New York, I'll have clients in Maine. I'll have clients in New Zealand. I'll have clients in China. So people realized that the boundaries that we had set for work had totally started to change. Another point is that hybrid work is here to stay. I'll show you the slide in a few minutes, but basically this is something that we are not going to be able to get around. When I say hybrid work, I'm talking about remote working and working in the office, a hybrid style of work. The next point is that Japan can be the perfect place for remote work because we all know that Japan is a great place. And I've been on this show, Sekai Ichi Uketai Jugyo, the greatest class in the world, the greatest school in the world, or something like that. It's a variety show in Japan. And the reason I was called to be on that show as the sort of the sensei is that last year they took a survey of people around the world, because everybody was worried that during COVID, everyone's going to forget about Japan and we're not going to have any more tourists. So people were worrying about that. So some international organization did a survey to a whole bunch of people. I think it was 6,000 people around the world. Where is the first place you want to go after lockdown finishes? Where is the first place you want to go after COVID is done? And Japan came out #1 in that survey. So you could answer a lot of different countries. So it wasn't only Japan, but out of all the countries, the one that got the most votes, the one that everybody wants to go to is Japan. Okay. So that was a big sort of wake up call of, no, Japan has not been forgotten. A lot of people really want to come here. And not only do they want to come as visitors, people want to come live here. People want to come work here, right? So we have to figure out in Japan, how are we going to handle this workcation concept? How are we going to handle this hybrid work concept, right? And then, so what I would describe as happening in Japan is not the great resignation. So you don't see a whole bunch of people leaving their jobs. What you see is this great realization. So when I came into Japan in 1988, when I first got here, it was a very set idea of work. You go in the morning, you stay until late at night, you go out drinking with your colleagues, and you go home and you do the same thing the next day. And then you use Saturday and Sunday to sleep and catch up on sleep and, you know, do your house chores and stuff. So it was very rigid, the style of work. But during COVID, all the clients, I mostly work with Japanese clients, all of them have, of course, out of necessity, inserted this idea of remote work into the daily work style. So everyone in Japan is realizing that things have changed. Things will change, and things are not going to go back to what it was. And so I think the great resignation, with a whole bunch of people moving jobs and, you know, setting out to be independent and setting up their own companies, was the stage that is kind of finishing up now. And the next one is the great realization that everything about work has changed. Everything that we thought was a set style of work is done. And so how do we as employees, employers, how do we in this new sort of society handle this? So here at the bottom, you can see this photo. This is the Kankocho, so the Ministry of Tourism, and they're really promoting the idea of workcation. So workcation and bureja. Bureja is such a cute word, bureja. So business and pleasure together becomes bureja. And then you have workcation. And what you notice here, does everyone see? There are not international people in the pictures. These are Japanese people. So the Ministry of Tourism is not saying, oh, all of you international visitors, you can do workations in Japan, although they should. I mean, that's what I say in all my speeches, that everybody coming from overseas is also going to be on a workation. So we need to figure out all these things. But look, they're focusing on Japanese people, that you can work, you can also have vacation, you can have them both, and you can create this kind of new work style. All right. The three big challenges. So basically, I've set the stage of work is changing. How is it changing? How has this happened? And I have a little bit of data here to share with you. So the great attrition, the resignation is real. This was a McKinsey report in 2022 in July. What they were saying is that you can see here, the likelihood that employees will leave their current job in the next 3 to 6 months. So basically 3 to 6 months would be getting into 2023. So at this moment, they're talking about where we are kind of now, right? And as the data came out and as the results came out, they found out that in the United States, 40% of the workforce either changed jobs or left their job during COVID, during those 2-3 years of COVID. 40%. So the situation of the work in the United States is so fluid right now, and it must be so hard for employers to figure out, how do you engage your workers? How do you keep them? How do you, maintain good talent? So that's the big conversation that's happening in the US right now, is not only how do you get fantastic talent, how do you keep them, right? So a lot of companies are introducing much more flexible work styles. So basically, the point that I want to make is, during COVID and right about now, during these 2.5 years, during these 3 years, 40% of the United States workforce either left their work or changed jobs. So that's one point. Second, hybrid work is here to stay. So this is a survey done by Pricewaterhouse, so PwC, in 2022. And so 2022, 12 months from now would be right around now. And they were asking, I think they did this survey was to 10,700 people all around the world, all different countries, asking them, what are your expectations for job roles 12 months from now? Okay, what are your expectations? Look at this. Globally, first of all, I have to explain that the pink, this bright pink color is remote, like full remote work. I would like to work fully remote. The orange color in the middle is I would like to have a hybrid work style where it's, 2 days a week in the office, 3 days not in the office. And then the yellow one is in person. I want to be totally back in the office, totally in person. As you can see globally, with all the different countries that they interviewed, 63% of people want a hybrid situation and 26% of people want fully remote. Only 11% want fully back in person. And look at Japan. A lot of times we think, oh, well, Japan, everybody loves being in the office. Everybody loves being together. Everybody, wants the face-to-face communication. Yes, that's true. But 66% of the people in Japan would like a hybrid version of work. Unthinkable in 1988. Like it wouldn't have even crossed anyone's mind 5 years ago. But hybrid work is a desirable thing even in Japan. And then fully remote, 23%, that's more than Indonesia. So 23% of people in Japan want a fully remote situation. Next slide. So, okay, we figured out, this is very small and I will explain exactly what it says. We figured out that the whole concept of work is changing, correct? People are leaving their jobs and thinking that, wait a minute, I don't have to be stuck in one company. I can do lots of different things. I'd rather be a kojin jigyo nushi. I'd rather be an independent contractor, rather start my own company. That's what's happening in the US. And oftentimes what happens in the US will happen elsewhere a little bit later. And then everyone around the world is saying, I would like a hybrid style of work. So then what happens? This is the most interesting slide that I was able to find. This is McKinsey 2021, towards the end of 2021. So I totally think that this is still applicable because everyone that I work with, any big company that you speak to is talking about how the heck do we retain our fantastic talent? Some of our best people are leaving. Why? Especially for a big Japanese company I work with, they have a lot of branches overseas. And they said that the management in Japan is so surprised as to why so many people are quitting the company. There's like a flood of quitting going on. Why? So we try to figure out, okay, why? What is the issue? It can't be only that the work style is changing, right? If it's only that the work style is changing, then if we introduce flexibility, everything should be fine, right? No. So what we found out here, I don't know how to make this screen bigger, so I'll just explain it. This graph is basically showing there's a big gap between the employer's idea of what's important to an employee and the employee's idea of what's important for them in the company. Okay, I'll say that again. There's a big gap between what the employers think the employees value and what the employees actually value, okay, at the company. So it's, when you see it like this, it's very clear. So the grid over here on the left side is the employees, okay? And on the bottom side is, on the bottom is the employers, okay? And so it basically is saying, what is the most important factor for someone to stay in the company from the employee point of view? And then from the employer point of view, what is the most important factor for the employers? No, I'm sorry. The employers, what do they think is the most important thing for the employees? It's very confusing. So the employees, what do they think is most important for them to stay at this company? For the employers, what are the employers thinking is important for the employees to stay in the company? Okay. So what they found out is that there's a huge gap here. The employers are saying, oh, everyone's leaving because they don't have enough compensation, or they have poor health, or they're looking for a better job. That's what the employers are saying is most important to the employees. Then the employees are saying, no, my most important thing for me staying in this company is, am I valued by my manager? Am I valued by the organization? Those are the 2 points that came up as what an employee feels is most important for them to stay in a company. So the employers are like, oh, they must not feel well, or they want more compensation, or they're looking for a better job, and kind of writing it off that way. And the only thing that was in common was here, the work-life balance. Both sides felt that this was important. So employers thought employees feel work-life balance is important. Employees also feel somewhat important, a little bit above that is work-life balance. But the most important thing was, am I valued by the organization? Does the organization see me? Do they understand me? Do they value my contribution? So this is a huge gap that we have, okay? And so we've set up the current situation. We've set up what we might consider, a problem. And so we go on to the next slide. This is one of my favorite business writers, Peter Drucker. And what he says, I totally align with this logic, is that the greatest danger in times of turbulence, okay, so we are in a time of turbulence, right? Climate change, economic challenges, like all this different stuff. And here we had COVID. It's just turbulence. Like, how do we handle this turbulence? So the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself. So the turbulence itself is not the problem. The problem is when you try to act with yesterday's logic. So you try to keep doing exactly what you were doing, or you try to go back to what you were doing, even though the whole foundation of the situation has changed. That's the biggest danger. So I was thinking of taking a couple questions here, but maybe I'll just go on and finish up, and then we can do the discussion at the end. Is that okay, William?
Well, we can check, see if there's anything that's come
Yeah,
up
is
in
there
the
anything
chat.
anybody would like clarified?
Got a couple of questions in there, but I think they can wait to the end. Just wanted to
Okay.
comment on the Peter Drucker slide. I'm so glad that you included that.
Yeah,
But yeah, not only is it dangerous to act with yesterday's logic, it's dangerous to act based on yesterday's instruction book or manual.
exactly.
There is no manual for what we're seeing right now.
That's
We
exactly
talk
what I was
about it,
saying. Yeah,
right? It's very hard to define the new norm. The new normal is that there is no normal anymore.
right.
There is no rule book. And so companies are going to be asked by their employees. And in Japan, I think there's a little bit of a time lag there because
Yeah,
typically, traditional Japanese companies haven't really surveyed their employees the right way.
right.
And they don't perhaps have the right tools to accomplish what they would need to get out of that survey. But the reality is every day has to be approached as a brand new challenge.
Right.
And you have to be engaged with your employees and find out what it's not just money, it's not just benefits,
Yes.
not just
Yes.
security. As you mentioned, it's about being valued, and it's about showing your employees through action. It's not just about telling people how great you think they are, which we try to do.
Yes.
It's not about feedback. That's just part of it. It's about action. How can companies show their appreciation for the efforts of their teams in action, in policy? Right?
Yes.
So that's going to keep all of us really busy over the coming years.
Right.
But I think it's a great opportunity. So back to you, Ruth.
Yeah, totally taking your point. I mean, the fact that we have to define the concept of workcation at the beginning of a speech about workcation, you know what I mean? It's like there is no clear answer because this is a turbulent time where everything is changing. In Japanese, it's gekihenchu, right? It's gekihen. So it's changing so much that there is no manual to refer to tell us how to move forward. And that can be extremely uncomfortable for a Japanese company, especially for the Japanese HR department. Not to have something like data driven, something that they can depend on and say, okay, this was successful at this other company, so maybe we should try this. That doesn't exist right now because there is no clear answer for how to address this. One good example that I have is I sit on the board of a company called Kadokawa. And Kadokawa realized that workation, work-life balance, remote work is really important when they were in the hiring process. So I feel like a lot of these companies overseas or in Japan, when you start to do your hiring and when the requirements of the people you're trying to hire changes, that's when that can incite a lot of change in the organization, right? Because Japan, I think, is probably one of the top places where it's hard to get good talent. So for most Japanese companies, the hiring is one of the biggest challenges that they have. So when they're in the hiring phase, they have people with actual decision-making capability interviewing these, prospective hirees, right? And at that time, if the person is like, well, I don't know, wait, how many days do we have to go to the office? If they're asking those kind of questions, that will really inspire a change in the Japanese system. So I think maybe this year, definitely next year, you're going to see a lot of relaxation of policy, I think, with a lot of these big companies. So your point is very well taken.
I think you're
All right,
exactly
so
right. Yeah.
it's just a few more slides, and then I'd really like to open it up to everybody else and what you're thinking. So this is kind of framed in the sort of the Japanese environment. So, I've actually only worked with Japanese companies in my life. I've never really worked in a foreign company. I haven't worked in the US or anything like that. So, my basis of understanding what's going on is sort of based in Japan, kind of makes sense. And I've been thinking a lot about, how do we encourage employees? How do we encourage society basically to use these new concepts, right? Because one of the things I love about Japan is everyone has a very strong sense of responsibility. And it's like, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And people will, until their task is done, they will stay late in the evening. A lot of the people that work in my company, I see emails coming like very late in the evening, and a lot of them are, raising kids. So after they put their baby to sleep, then they're doing their work, and, they're all independent contractors. So it's not that much of a problem. But at the same time, how do I, as a leader in my company, encourage my employees and then encourage all of my clients and advise all of my clients on how do we get people to utilize this. The other day, my son actually works at a company called Bain and Company, and he got his new contract with them. He's getting relocated to Denmark, so he got his new contract with them. And in the contract, stipulated in the contract, is if your partner has a baby, you get 9 months full paid paternity leave in the contract, written in the contract.
That's Denmark.
It's Denmark, but that's probably legally required, I'm sure, by the country. But that's where things are going. If you want to keep excellent talent, even for Japan, that's where things are going. So on the way to that, I think this whole idea of encouraging work-life balance was really important for employees and employers, right? And then as a part of, we see you, we understand you, we value you, as William was saying, as a way to, literally show that, as a way to put that into action, is how we can encourage people to achieve that work-life balance. And the work-life balance, the opportunities for work-life balance have gotten so large that it's very hard, even for the employee, for the employer, everyone, to understand, what is the difference between remote work and workcation? What are the strictures that we will put on workcation, right? How many times do we need people to come into the office? So I've seen, it's a very small example still, like William was saying, and I also agree that there is no real manual yet, but a lot of these companies are coming out with reports saying that, in order to deal with this very difficult, changing, turbulent situation, some of these big companies in the US are actually encouraging the employees to have a no email day. Did you hear that? A whole day.
I'm trying to find a pen to write that down.
So I think it was like 1% of companies in the US have introduced the concept of a no email day. And it was something like 14% of the companies in the US have introduced something called um, a no meeting day. So this is one day every week you guarantee will not have a meeting. So no meeting day.
That I've heard of, and I think
Yeah,
it's starting to gain some traction here in
right.
Japan, because we've actually, as all of the participants on the session know, we have more meetings now than we ever had before in person.
True. I
It's just
agree.
a constant stream. So I think that's an
Yeah.
excellent idea.
So my idea, and actually, just because of circumstance, when I was working at Space Design, the real estate company I was working at before, my little kids were very little. So I couldn't go to the office every day. And I kind of made that one of my criteria for working with them. And thankfully, Ezoe-san was the owner of that company was very open-minded and forward-thinking. And he made it possible for me. So I've been able to be sort of non-structured, non-structured worker since 1992, because that's when I set up my translation company. And so I haven't been working in the office from morning till night for a very long time. It's only been 4 years of my career that I did that. So I guess something that I would do to encourage employees to take advantage of this is to make rest and change of scenery a part of the job. Okay. So it's kind of like we open up our minds to the concept of our employees, even the employers, the leadership, the management, all of our clients will be more efficient if they rest and experience a change of scenery. Okay. So we change our concept of the idea of what is efficiency, what is not efficiency, what is management, how much management do we need, how much do we trust our employees, right? So one of the aspects of seeing people, right, and valuing people is trusting them and understanding that rest is one of the most important aspects of their life and also makes their work better. So I think particularly in Japan, where it's kind of like, taking paid leave or something is sort of like, maybe looked down upon, or I don't think it's as much as it used to be, but it used to be like, you have to ask, 2 weeks in advance, it was very, very strict. And oftentimes, I mean, I don't know if this still happens, but basically you would always use the nitsu, you have a fever, so you can't come in, or your kid has a fever, so you can't come in. So it's kind of like, unless you are sick, you don't really take a day off. Whereas going forward, what we need is rest itself, and reviving your feelings and rethinking things is actually part of the job. So in the job description, just like my son has the paternity leave included in his contract, in the job description we would say, and we need you to take off, and we need you to take a rest. And we have this thing called a workcation, where you can leave, you can work from a different location for a month. But we would just be very clear on, what you need to do, what are the tasks that need to be done, what are the meetings you would need to be in. And it can be like a negotiated period of rest. And then you actually have full on vacation where you allow people to, turn off their phones. But honestly, even though Europe still does that, I really think that the turning off the phones and totally going off grid, I don't know if that's going to be a main thing anymore. I think it's going to be more like a workation, like a total hybrid of everything, so that when you want to take off, you can take off, and people realize that you don't need a full week. If you have like 2 or 3 days of total rest, you're totally fine and revived, and you can go back. So if we do this workation thing well, and if our employees start to really use it, I feel like people will feel revitalized, and it'll make their work results better. So we, as people who work with everyone, need to see this rest as part of the job. And the more Japanese people see that rest and change of scenery is part of their job and makes them a better employee, the more they will be able to take off. So I wrote here, from now on, everything will be mixed. So keeping the fundamentals steady will be key. For Japan, that is reliability and responsibility. So as I was saying earlier, we need to decide, where to draw the line. Like, what are the values that need to be kept even during a workation, even during remote work, maybe even during a vacation, honestly. That's what I think, is that the point is we need to stay reliable to all of our clients, and we have to make sure we're responsible. So you don't like drop the ball and go on a workation, right? You need to maintain the reliability that you have and the responsibility you have. So we are going to keep those as a core value of our workplace, reliability and responsibility. And on top of that, this is how we're going to do workcation. I think Japanese people would be totally comfortable with that, and it would become much more common. Frame workations as part of the job. Setting guidelines about when to be available, which tasks to complete, and by when will make your employee feel safe with this new opportunity and change. Then the second one, and then we're getting to the last slide, so don't worry, I'm almost done, is framing workations as a way to support local communities and economies. Okay, this applies to every country, I believe. That if we say, if you go on a workation and you go over to Yonezawa and Yamagata, or if you go to, I don't know, somewhere in Nepal and you're going to work from there, you are actually helping the economy of that local community. So we as a company, almost like part of our CSR, part of our way to, have social responsibility is that we are sending our super talented employees to different locations where they can work from those locations. They go to those restaurants, they stay in those places, and they contribute to the local communities and economies. And I believe that this will absolutely resonate with Japanese employees, with any employees that you have anywhere in the world. Particularly, the example I have is from Japan, so I'm sorry about that. This is a very interesting graph that I found from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Somusho. And this is the Furusato Noze system that they have in Japan, where you can use part of the tax that would normally go to, Tokyo Metropolitan. You can buy things from the local communities with the tax that you would pay. So instead of paying tax to Tokyo or paying tax to your tax place where a lot of people live and they have a lot of income, you can decide, no, I'd rather buy crab from Shimane. And so I'm going to buy crab, and the crab is priced about double what it normally is, but you basically pay that, you get the crab, and you also get the credit with your taxes. So it's called Furusato Noze. It's trying to spread out the tax income to the local communities to help these local communities. The graph is showing how many people in Japan do this. So 7.4 million people did Furusato Noze this past year, and last year. So you can see that it's just growing, growing, growing. So what I'm trying to say here is that people in Japan have a very deep and real concern for the local communities and for helping all these local communities that are seeing a huge decrease in population and stuff, right? So my argument is that if we frame workations and if we frame this new work style as, first of all, part of your job for your benefit, for our benefit, for your client's benefit, because we believe that if you are mentally strong and you are feeling happy with your life, that you're going to do better work. So this is part of your job. Please do it as a responsible, reliable part of your job. And second of all, this is to help Japan. This is to help our country. This is to help the local communities. So we need you to do it. If we frame it in those two ways, I really think that this workation idea will become a fundamental part of Japanese business style, or basically business style anywhere. So that's the end of my presentation. I will stop sharing, and I'd like to open it up to questions or discussion. So pass it back to you, William.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was extremely eye-opening, to say the least. And there's a lot to discuss, I'm sure. Before we jump over to the questions, we've got some questions coming through. Just want to sort of recap some of the things that I picked up on. You mentioned trust. You mentioned trust a couple of times. Yes. And I think that is a huge, huge sort of key word for not only for workations, because of course you're not on a time card when you're on a workation, but we have to trust employees. Employees have to trust companies that the companies have the better interests of their employees in mind, and the employees have to be trusted by their companies.
Exactly.
Three things, right? It's a task-based process. So, accomplish your task, get the work done, make time for your colleagues, and take care of your clients. If you can do those three things, it doesn't matter when you clock in and when you clock out. We have to trust our employees to design that working style themselves when they're in that different environment. That was one thing. And then I'm also hearing what I've been calling the work-work balance. And that doesn't mean more work. It means a balance of different working styles within your working framework. And people think, well, it's expensive to travel overseas or even to go stay in the Japanese countryside. That doesn't have to be every month.
Right.
Save that, once a year, twice a year. That's a bit of a treat, but there are ways that you can get away from the daily grind and still get your work done, even in your own neighborhood.
Exactly.
And I think that people they emphasize the work from home concept a little bit too much. It's not. We call it off-site work.
Right.
I mean, of course, you have to be careful with your data security and all of that, but you could be Starbucks is the cliche, but you can get your work done in a whole variety of locations.
And you see a lot of young Japanese entrepreneurs starting up these share office places all over the place. And there's this
offices,
there's this other thing called Instabase, where you can become a member, and people have opened up because the Akiya problem in Japan is real, right? So people have refurnished their sort of Akiya mansion with tables and Wi-Fi and stuff. So you go to Instabase and you say, hey, I need a room for 1 hour in wherever, Utsunomiya and Tochigi, and several different options come up, and you sign up online and you go, and the key's there, and you use that room. I mean, there are so many tools now for offsite working.
Exactly. So we have to learn how to take advantage of those tools, but companies have to speak with their employees and find out what they need. It's not necessarily just a special allowance or a different kind of device or whatever it might be. I think we need to talk with our teams, and that's really, really key. So on that note, let's hear what the audience is asking. I have a question that's come through in the Q&A, which I will read out. As an employee, what's your advice for dealing with an employer who announces they are going to implement workcation, but it denies anyone who tries to take advantage of the policy?
Oh,
excellent. Oh, excellent question. Yeah, I would like to believe that wouldn't happen if you're working for a reasonable employer. But Ruth, what's your take on that?
Well, I would say just wait, because if they're not accepting the workation applications, but it's basically hypocritical, right? They're saying workation is allowed, but they're not accepting when you apply for it. Just wait, and I guarantee you in 6 months, they'll start activating it because people will quit because of that now. People will quit. So they'll start to see the satisfaction level of the employees going down. They'll start to see more people like rumbling about, wait, I think I might want to change jobs. And then they're going to start realizing, wait, why are people changing jobs? They might interview somebody and they say, well, the workation thing is there, but I applied for it. And somebody said, no, my other manager, and things will start to change. I think the key point is the person who's experiencing this, the talent. So the power balance is on the employee side now. So if the employer is doing something like that, people are going to start leaving. People are going to be dissatisfied. Results are not going to be as good. So I would say stick around for 6 months and see how things change.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. And just like taking paid leave, I mean, you can't say no. It's a company policy. Not only is it the norm, or in some cases the law, but if a company has taken the time to design and provide its workforce, its employees with this type of a program, they have to allow people to take advantage of it. They want people to take advantage of it.
I have a good example of something that a Japanese company, I don't know if this would help anybody, but one of the Japanese companies I work with about maternity leave and about when you have a baby, like how they're going to handle that. So one of the companies I sit on the board with were looking to change their employee handbook about what to do when you have a baby or how to handle that. And there was one clause in that that I thought was totally unrealistic as someone who's had a baby in the past, that no, this would not happen. And they said, well, but this is what the government stipulates. Okay. And I was like, well, I think the government needs to change too. So that was one company. Then I went to the other company that I sit on the board with. And what they had done, remember I was telling you about the talent and trying to retain good talent. The women in all these in these companies are so important. So what they did is they got a bunch of the women who work in the company to come together in a little committee and look at that clause in the employee handbook and talk about it and ask questions like, what do you think about this? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? In the end, they took it out of the employee handbook. They removed that clause. Even though it's in the government guidance, they said, no, that's old school. We're going to do our way that makes our employees feel very valued. And I thought, because the employee, the power is now on the employee side, as long as you voice things about, wait a minute, you said workation and now we can't take it, I don't get it. The employees have the power now. So coming together, talking to HR, that's a really strong move.
Absolutely. Talking to HR, talking to managers, talking to your colleagues, it's a win-win for everybody involved. So just jump into the next question that's come through. See what we have here. Well, I think this is an obvious one. Here's the question. Does having too many rules or guidelines defeat the purpose of a workcation?
Yes, it does.
Well, that was an easy one.
I think that maybe what we could do with a workation is we could say, okay, because I believe that employees have to come together for meetings regularly, as much as you possibly could. So maybe during a workation, you would set one day before the person leaves, like we would say, okay, so Tuesday is going to be like your available day. Every other day, it'll just be normal email back and forth whenever you want to. But let's make Tuesday or let's make Thursday your day when you are available. And before they go, you say, okay, Jenny is available on Tuesday. So if you need to call her, if you need to have a meeting with her, if you need to interact with her on something, Tuesday would be the day to do it. She'll probably be available on other days too, but that's not really decided. Tuesday is the day. And I think that might be a good way to do it. Maybe you could ask them to choose which day they want, maybe Tuesday and Wednesday. So then they can really relax on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, right? So being in charge of your own schedule is the beauty of a workation. But then we also have to realize that there are still people not on a workation who need to get things done. So we have to make sure that it's clear when we're going to be available. Usually what I do, because I go to places where there's a time difference, I'll say, okay, usually in the morning, I will be totally available. Like I'll be able to answer phone calls, be on meetings, all that stuff. But from the afternoon, when it's really late in Japan anyway, I probably won't be available. So you won't see an answer to my email until the next morning. Like clarifying things like that, being transparent is really important.
Exactly. It's not about rules. It's about parameters, scheduling, planning, communication. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Here's a question that's come in from Steve.
Yeah.
Hi, Ruth, the thing I feel is a little missing with regards to flexible work is that the company's clients are often forgotten in the process. As a business owner, I am happy to have people work flexibly, but not to the detriment of our clients. Of course, we are in the service industry. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, the client, okay, this is the difficult one for all of us who are leading the company. The clients should never know who's on workation and who's not. So
Good point.
the client wouldn't notice if we do it right. So when I went to Israel and I'm basically on a workation, this is in February, literally, unless I planned it really early. So I tried not to put too many meetings. I still had a couple meetings during the time there, but pretty much none of my clients knew I was gone because the team knew I was going. We had organized like how we're going to handle things. I knew the time difference and how to work that. So I think one of the criteria that we can put in place as employers is that your clients should not notice that you're on a workation. If you're on a vacation, yes, it's fine to have the little message, the automatic message that comes in and says, oh, I'm away from this day to this day, that's fine. But when you're on a workation, you should not put in that automatic message of my emails might be delayed because I'm on a workation. You shouldn't do that. there should be somebody else who will handle those tasks. So maybe 2 weeks in advance, you would start putting somebody else in CC on all the important mails with your clients. And then that person, while you're on vacation, would also be sort of on guard for emails, important rushed emails that come through. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that there is no manual on this yet, but to say it really bluntly, I really think the client should never notice who's on workcation and who's not. You got to figure that out.
Exactly, and that's one of the real challenges, perhaps more challenging for some industries. But I think it's all about compromise, right?
Yes.
Our clients or customers that we work with don't expect, well, unless we're offering a 24-hour helpline as a service, they don't expect us to be on call 24 hours a day. What they want is relatively timely response, quality, professionalism. So you have to make time at some point during the day. And I think with the time differences, this can be a challenge. I was working in the States for 3 months in 2021, and
Yeah.
I just knew that I would have my mornings relatively free, but I had to make time after dinner.
Right.
I couldn't have that glass of wine with dinner because
Yeah.
in order to be able to communicate with the teams in Japan and join meetings, I had to start meetings at 7 p.m. So, that kind of compromise, not sacrifice, but compromise.
And it's also hard when people are working on commission and things like that, because some employees don't want to, include others if there's like sensitive, that's how we were in real estate with space design. But the way we handle, because I had to go on long trips all the time to like India and stuff. So we would, if it was commission and the order came in while I was gone and somebody else was taking care of it and we were doing it together, like both of us on email, then we would split the commission. So, it's kind of like we have to change some of the structures of how the company is set up to encourage, teamwork and sharing things and helping each other. So it's not easy.
Definitely not easy. And nothing is. But I see this as a tremendous opportunity for companies. I see this as a tremendous opportunity for Japan. And I love the fact that the ministry you showed on one of the early slides was focusing on Japanese families, Japanese workers first, because it has to start locally, especially in a place like Japan, which has tended to be a little bit conservative when it comes to working style. Start local, and then it will grow organically. I think we are coming to the end of our time today.
I think we have one more question. I just noticed
okay.
from Nora-san.
You can go ahead and read that out.
Is that okay? This
Sure.
is a very, very good question. I'm not sure if I have the answer, but regarding workaround overseas, is it possible with regards to taxes, Social Security, permanent establishment, work permits, etc.? Within Japan, sure, but overseas, how is that handled? Okay, from my understanding, there's at least with the US, I'm a US citizen, and then also living in Japan, it all kind of is based on where your tax home is. So if you're in Japan for over 100 something days, Japan is considered your tax home. So the other amount of days I could work from another place and I wouldn't receive any kind of detriment because of that. That's my understanding. William, do you have anything to add to that? Or Steve is writing.
No, well, yeah, I'm far from an expert on international taxation, but yeah, exactly. If you're a full-time resident of Japan, if you're a permanent resident of Japan, your tax home is here. And just because you're working overseas, as long as you're remaining on a Japan payroll, right, that it shouldn't have serious implications for taxes. The other way around, as a U.S. national, which like Japan, the U.S. taxes its citizens, its passport holders on global income. If you are outside of Japan, as a foreign resident of Japan, if you're outside of Japan and in the US for any period of time during a given tax year, you do lose part of your tax credit, right? The foreign earned income exclusion, whatever it is now, 100 some odd $1,000. So there are some minor implications for US nationals going to the US.
But I really think that this is a point that us as employers, as well as HR people, really, really need to start checking, because we need to be able to advise our employees on, any kind of repercussion they might have from doing workation. But I think a
Exactly.
workation for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that will not be a problem. That will not be a detriment to anything. If you're talking like 3 months or 4 months, half a year, then you really have to think. And I think Steve would be the expert on that. So if you have any questions about this, please ask William or
Let's all
Steve.
email Steve about taxes then. Okay. Sounds like a plan. On that note, sorry, Steve, that was a joke. I think we do have to close things for today. So a big thanks to our speaker, Ruth Jarman. Thank you, Ruth.
Yeah,
It's
one
always a
thing
pleasure.
Steve says very clearly, since this is recorded, I am not a tax expert. So please do not ask me about taxes.
No problem. No problem. We'll give you 3 months to prepare for the next webinar, and we'll do taxes then. So thanks to our participants. And again, we are recording this. We'll be sharing the link with everyone who joined. It will be a private link on YouTube, so not visible to the entire world. Don't worry about that. And we're happy to take follow-up questions as well. So please don't be afraid to send us an email or send us comments. We're happy to discuss things in more detail. So thanks again, everybody. It was a pleasure to be able to do another webinar for you, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.